Hello and welcome to Excel Essentials. In this session, I'll be covering data validation. Now, data validation is something that we may be familiar with in Excel, and one of the most common ways that we see this expressed in spreadsheets is via a drop-down menu. So, say you clicked in a cell and you needed to choose between, say, 6 or 7 options, you might see a little drop-down list and you would then select the value that's most appropriate. And that is one of the most common ways that we see data validation used. Now, I'm going to show you some other ways you can use data validation within your spreadsheets. Firstly, we're going to start off with limiting our values to whole numbers alone. So as you see, I've got my little table here, and I'm going to select the range of cells I want to limit on just having whole numbers. So I'm selecting these 10 cells here underneath whole number. Now we're going to go to data in the ribbon, and when we click on that, we're going to look for data tools, and we're going to look for the area where we see text to columns. On larger monitors, you'll be able to see the full data validation box, but if not, you will just see this icon among the rest of the icons in the data tools section. Once you see data validation, click on it and you will get this data validation box open up. Now, one of the great things as well is it will always open up to settings by default. And if we click the drop down on allow, we want to limit this to whole numbers. Now we can make this between a certain range, or we can make it greater than a certain number. And you have the same options you have in adjusting that, like you might be familiar with in conditional formatting when you're saying when greater than 15 show green, when between 10 and 15 show amber, and less than 10 show red. Just an example there. And say we want to choose it to only have values greater than a specific number, and we're going to select 0, implying that we want only values greater than 0 being shown in that cell. For example, 12 or 73. And we're going to click OK. Now, if I go in and I try and type text, so if I type yes, you see we get this value doesn't match the data validation restrictions defined for this cell. And we're given the option to re-enter data, and let's say we want to put 3.0. Excel corrects that to 3 and we can put a whole number. We can also put 8, 29, 476, as long as it is any number greater than 0, as we specified in data validation. However, let's say we put in 0. This value doesn't match because 0 isn't greater than 0. It is equal to, so it won't allow for that number to be input. If you do want to help people who are inputting data into the column for whole number by letting them know that values greater than 0 should be input, otherwise leave it blank, we can do that by either doing it to the whole number, or we can do it to the cells where we have data validation put on. Let's say we want it on these 10 cells we put the whole number limit on. We can go back to data validation. And what we're going to do is we're going to look at this input message part of the box that pops up. Now, we're going to give it a little title, and we're just going to put whole number, for example, because that is the column we're working with. You can make this more refined if you want. And then we're going to put in a little message. Please enter a whole number greater than 0. Otherwise, leave blank. And we're going to click OK. And as you see, as soon as we enter that cell, it gives us this little message. Please enter a whole number greater than 0. Otherwise, leave blank. And it's only selected on those 10 cells. Now, we could do the same for decimal, limiting it to decimal. values. Now we're going to select the next 10 cells in column B. And we're going to go back to data validation. We're going to ignore the input message for the moment, and we're going to change our allow to decimal. Now we can have any decimal, for example, between 0 and let's say 35. And if we click OK, we could put in 4.5, 28.7. Let's see if we can put in 1,000. No, because it's outside our range. But let's see if we can put in 10. And 10 works because 10 is also 10.0 and it falls as a value within the range. It's just you would never normally write 10.0 within your cell. Excel will automatically convert it to the whole number. Now, I'm going to move over to column C onto the most common type of data validation we see, and it is list. Now, list can be done in two different ways, and I will show you both of those methods. So we're going to select, let's say, 5 of those cells first, and we're going to go to data validation, and we're going to change the allow to list. Now, one of the great things with a list is you can either input your own list and separate it with commas. Depending on your region, you may have to separate that with a semicolon instead. And I would generally say use this method if your list is very short. So if it's containing 3 items, for example, not started, in progress, and complete, I would say you can use this method. And the way you would write that out is not started, in progress, and complete. You don't have to put the spaces between the comma and your option. It's perfectly fine to leave that with a space or no space. Excel will still pick up your drop down menu. So if we click OK, as you see, we've got nothing in these 5 cells below. But if we go here into one of the 5 cells we applied the list to, if we open the drop down, you see not started, in progress, and complete. Now, let's say we wanted to enter our own text and say on hold. We get obviously the standard data validation. It doesn't match one of the restrictions. Now, what you can do is you can add that in as an option. So we're going to select that selection and go back to data validation. And then we're going to type comma and put on hold, and you can add another one on. So if I was to click on that complete one, you see the on hold is also there, and the same on the other cells. Now let's talk through the second method in which you can see the list usually used for, and I would recommend it if you have really long lists for a selection, for example, countries. I'm not going to bring through a list of countries, but I'm going to use the same principle using the drop-down items we had for cells 2 through to 6. Now I'm going to type in here not started, in progress, completed, and on hold. Now, if we select 7 through to row 7 through to 11 in here, I'm going to go back to data validation, and I'm going to select list again. Now, what you do instead when you want to select data, specific data in a column, for example, is you will click this upwards arrow. And then you would select the column where you find either the data or the specific selection. Now this I wouldn't say is good practice considering it's only 4 values. I would rather you select the actual 4 values. And once you're happy, click the little box to pop it back into the big box and click OK. And now as you see, we've got not started, in progress, completed, and on hold. If I was to change one of these values from in progress to delayed, you would see that the drop down has now changed to delayed instead. So it's dynamic as well. Generally, this is best used when you have larger lists of selections, so from a list of 20, for example, and that can be very helpful. One of the drawbacks with using that is if I was to delete this column, the data validation would no longer work. That is one of the problems, which means you couldn't even input one of the values that used to be existing within that. So that is one of the drawbacks, is that you don't have that fallback. Whilst here, someone would actually have to go into data validation and delete the words you've written in. So as potentially something of good practice, if this is coming from data in one sheet, and if that sheet has no other data in besides holding your values, you may wish to hide that within your worksheet. And you can do that by right-clicking on the worksheet and clicking Hide in the menu. You can also do data validation on dates. So you could select the dates to be within a certain date range. This might be relevant for projects, and the way we can do that is by going to data validation and changing the allow type to date. Now, say we had a project that started on the 1st of January 2023 and that it was to end on the 31st of December 2024. Now, this would be very good because any dates outside of that range obviously won't be allowed because the project won't be running during that time period. Now, if we click OK, we could put in today's date, and you can do this by holding Control and hitting the semicolon, and that will auto-fit or today's date into any Excel cell. Now I'm going to hit Enter, and you see that was perfectly fine. But say we wanted to change that to 2025, and you see we get this error. Now what you could do is you could make this error more specific, and I can show you how you can do that as well. So on this date range as an example, if we go back to data validation, we have this error alert. Now if we click on that, we can add in a title and an error message. Now the title could be date not in range, and the error message could be the date entered doesn't fall within the project timeline. This might be an example that you would use. And once you're happy, you can click OK, and it will save that for you. So if I hit that to bring today's date and change the 3 in the year to a 5, you see you now have a more specific definition of why the date you've entered or the data you have entered into the cell is not valid. You can obviously make this more specific by also putting in the project timeline dates of the 1st of January 2023 to 31st of December 2024, but that is dependent on if you want to do that. It obviously is only an extra seconds extra worth of work. And you can also do the same for time. So say we select our cells again and we change the allow type in settings from any value to time. Now, say we wanted the time to be between working hours of 9 and 5:30, for example. You can input your time as such. And you can separate your hours and from minutes and minutes from seconds using your colons. And once you're happy, click OK. One thing I will ask when you do use time is to make sure that the cell selection you have has time as the format as well. So if I was to enter in, for example, 11:30, you see that's perfectly fine. 12:15, perfectly fine. Let's put in 6:45 in the evening. That isn't fine. And finally, we have text length. Yes, you can limit the length of text within a cell. So if we go back to data and data validation, we're going to click on allow and click on text length. Now, say we want the text to be less than, say, less than 5, so a maximum of 4 characters, and we can do that. So if I click OK, say I had an ID and the ID began with 2 letters A, B, and then it has 2 digits, such as 0, 1. We can input that AB01, not a problem. Problem would arise if, for example, we had 100 ABs. So if I was to put in AB100, we see we have an issue saying that we've gone over, and this could be when you then switch over to go AC01. And it's very good if your IDs have to be a specific length, regardless of what system you input it into. Stay tuned for more Excel essentials.